right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, the official competitor list for the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro, which is this coming weekend, just dropped. So I want to take a look at that both for men's open bodybuilding and for classic physique. So let's start with men's open bodybuilding here. Honestly, overall, it's really mainly the names that we've been familiar with for the past 7-8 weeks now, all the big names that we knew were doing it. After seeing this list, there aren't really any other standout names to me that were added. But let's just go through it here. Joe Ballinger, Pavel Barron, William Bonac, Douglas Connor, Marcelo Pedro de Cruz, Martin Fitzwarer, Ron Gordon, Michael Krizo, Derek Lunsford, Vincenzo Massone, Justin Musial, Leandro Senshi Perez, Vitaly Ugonikov, Nick Walker, and Bartley Weaver IV. So 15 people in this lineup. And again, the main guys that we've been talking about for weeks, William Bonac, Martin Fitzwater, Michael Krizo, Derek Lunsford, GoodVito, Nick Walker. And then Leandro Perez, also kind of noteworthy here, runner-up, of course, to GoodVito at the Arnold Classic South America show. So really one of his early rivals, I guess, in bodybuilding, his first competitive win. That was the second-place guy. But overall, I think those top, 5 or 6 names don't really change. I think that first call-out is going to include Bonac, Krizo, Lunsford, Nick, Martin, GoodVito. So, yeah, 6 guys. And I want you guys to give me your predictions in the comments below. Now that you know the full 15-name competitor list, and there's no secrets at this point, what is your top 6? Not just your top 3, your top 6 in order. Again, I'm going to go Derek winning. I think I'm still going to go Nick in second. I think I'm still going to go Martin in third. 4, 5, and 6, I think, are going to be difficult. I think based on how Bonac looked in Detroit, I would feel comfortable if he looks like he looked in Detroit. I'd feel comfortable with Bonac 4th, and then either Krizo or Vito. I think it'll be kind of a toss up between them for 5th and 6th. And the reason I say that, so first let's talk about GoodVito posted a back lat spread update. So I wanted to put that side by side with Nick Walker's update. These were posted a couple days ago, but I wanted to talk about them in this video. So a lot of people were obviously comparing the front double bicep between Nick and Vito the other day. We talked about that. Now a lot of people are comparing the back lat spread between Nick and Vito. And I'll say this, with Vito, he looks really impressive on Instagram. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think one of the reasons why he does is I think these pictures are heavily filtered and heavily edited, because when you put it side by side with Nick, his back looks really good. He looks really good from the back in Instagram updates. But one thing we know about Nick is that Nick doesn't edit his pictures. He doesn't make them or take them in the most flattering lighting. He doesn't edit them. He just posts what it is. First thing in the morning, fasted, or after a pump, and even puts that in the caption, whether he's fasted or whether he just trained and what he trained or what he ate, all that stuff. I feel like the reason I'm saying this is because we've seen Vito on Instagram look crazy for several years now. And on stage, it isn't quite the same. So the reason why I wanted to point this out, even though in this picture, yes, his back looks really good, him alone in the gym under good lighting with a pump, edited, his back looks good, for sure. But we just saw him on stage at the Arnold Classic South America, and his back didn't look like how it looks in this picture. And I don't think the back lat spread is his worst shot. I think it's the back double bicep, which we haven't gotten to see yet, except for back on stage at the Arnold Classic South America. But I think still, when you look at the totality of it, look at how much lower and how much more developed Nick is in the lower lats. Look at how much lower his lats come. That's one thing I notice about GoodVito is his lats are a little bit higher inserted, and that mid to lower lat area isn't as filled out, whereas Nick's lats in that mid to lower lat area almost go all the way down to his glutes. We talked about this with William Bonac at the Detroit Pro. His lats are so low inserted, they literally touched his glutes at some points in the posing. GoodVito doesn't quite have that. They're also hitting the pose at a very different angle. Nick is leaning more back into the pose, and GoodVito is leaning more forward. So I just wanted to talk about this a little bit more in this video because I've seen some of this discourse here lately, especially with the front double bicep conversation and now with this lat spread conversation, comparing Nick and Vito. And a lot of people seem to be saying in the comment sections that Vito is going to beat Nick, and I just really don't believe that to be true. I would be shocked if GoodVito came in here and beat Nick Walker. And I was looking at this update from Nick, which was posted today, so 5 days out, this video here where he does a little bit of posing in the video. And I really like how Nick is looking at this point in his prep. I saw some people commenting that Nick looks downsized. And I can see that perspective, but I think if he actually is downsized, it's probably a good thing, because I think the reason he would do that, if that is the case, would be A, to bring down his midsection, which, let's be honest, at the New York Pro last year, that was probably the biggest point of criticism against Nick. And a lot of these updates that we're seeing, I think he did bring down his midsection. And the other reason I could see him downsizing would be to sacrifice some of that size for better conditioning and more detail, which I think is another good thing. Nick was already an absolute freak. Nick was limited in the sense that how much bigger was Nick really going to get? Where was Nick really going to grow and add size other than, the lower body, the quads? But Nick being a shorter guy with his frame, he really wasn't going to be able to grow much more into any show that he does. He really, I would say, was close to maxing out his frame as far as the muscle that he carries. He's a freak. So I saw some comments saying, well, he looks downsized, as if that's a bad thing. And I think the two things that would be an attempt to fix would be the midsection and conditioning, which would be good things for Nick. Because even a downsized Nick is probably still going to be one of the freakiest guys in this lineup from a muscularity standpoint, maybe aside from a guy like Michael Krizo. But at the same time, I would be surprised if he was downsized here, because at the beginning of his prep, I believe that was the heaviest he's ever been. He was 302 or 303 when he started his prep. And I've noticed that over the past couple of weeks, he hasn't been putting his weight in the caption of these updates. And I don't know whether that means anything or not, whether that means it's high or low. But the downsize thing, I don't even know that he is. I mean, I do see it visually, what people are talking about. But from a standpoint of body weight, I don't even know that that's going to turn out to be true. He might be heavier than he's ever been if he was. I'm trying to think how many. I think he was 10 weeks out at 303, something like that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Is Nick actually downsized or not? And I also saw this video of Martin the other day at a week out. And Martin, so here's the thing. If Nick is downsized, I would say when it comes to Nick versus Martin, especially if you go back to last year's New York Pro, when it comes to Nick versus Martin, I think that was the main separating factor between Nick and Martin was size. And I think that Martin, for this prep, looks like he's added muscle. He looks bigger. He looks fuller. Maybe doesn't look as conditioned as Nick at this point. And that, I think that's been kind of the criticism in the guest posing video a week or two ago, and even some of the criticism that I saw of this video. But I think the gap between Nick and Martin was size. And I think that was the deciding factor at the New York show, in addition to Martin, I think maybe not being as conditioned as he was in Detroit, but I think the gap was really just size, because Nick's been around longer than Martin has. And I think Martin has bridged that gap to an extent, and I've said this in several videos, and I'll say it again in this video. I think that will be the real battle. When I say Nick in second, Martin in third, I'm wishy-washy on that. I think that will be the real battle at this show, is second and third place. I think those guys are going to be very, very close on the scorecards. I really do think that Derek is going to win this, and if Derek doesn't, I think it's likely going to be a massive upset, and it would probably mean that Derek was very off here, or it would mean that we've seen the best version we've ever seen of somebody else. Because, again, everybody in this lineup, except for GoodVito, has competed against Derek and has never beaten Derek up until this point. So if Derek does not win this show, it would have to be one of those two things. Either Derek is really off and he deserves to lose, or one of these guys brings their all-time best, better than we've ever seen them on stage before, and that becomes good enough to beat an on version of Derek. It's got to be one of those two in my mind. But when it comes to second and third, that's where I think the real battle is going to be, because I really think that top three will be Nick, Derek, and Martin. And those other two placings, I think, will be extremely close. And I said this in a previous video as well. I saw a lot of Brazilian fans saying, like, GoodVito is going to win this show. Honestly, I do not see a world where that happens unless every one of these top guys, if Nick, Derek, and Martin are all like really, really off and Vito is 110%, I just don't see a world where Vito wins this. It's hard for me to even imagine a world where GoodVito is even in the top three here, because that top three is so golden. And I think one of the selling points of this lineup is that you could even argue, when you look at this competitor list, let's go back to the list here for a second. You could argue this is almost as exciting as last year's Mr. Olympia, because Nick wasn't at last year's Mr. Olympia. GoodVito wasn't at last year's Mr. Olympia. Michael Krizo was not at last year's Mr. Olympia. Those are three very high-level guys, very exciting guys, dark horse type of guys, mass monsters and freaks that were not even at the Olympia. You've got all three of them in this lineup, plus a Mr. Olympia champ, Derek Lunsford, plus a top 4 Olympian, Martin Fitzwarer, who you could probably argue was the most improved bodybuilder, or you can make some type of argument for like bodybuilder of the year for 2024. I would argue that in open bodybuilding, I would probably give that to Martin. What he did last year compared to what he did in 2023, I would say was probably one of the biggest jumps in a bodybuilder's career in a 1-year span of time that we've seen in a very long time. But let's go to the next story that I've got for you guys today. So let's look at Terrence Ruffin's latest physique update, which I think is absolutely incredible. And let's put that side by side with the classic physique competitor list, because we haven't talked much about who Terrence is going to face here. So let's go ahead and run through this competitor list here. You've got Zay Adonis, Dom Carter, Joe Davis, Cake de Oliveira, who I think looks incredible right now, ADK Diaz, Adka Diaz, Camilo Diaz, Jameer Grady, Murat Khan, Brady King, Jamie Leroyce, Leo Merhofer, Juan Medina, Josema Munoz, who also I think looks incredible right now as well, Richard Nagy, Anton Ratushny, Damian Ricketts, Terrence Ruffin, and James Smith. So for me, looking at how incredible Terrence looks in this update, in all the updates that we've seen of Terrence cumulatively going into this show, and I look at this lineup and I see some standout names that I've seen and heard the chatter on social media. I've seen their updates. Like I said, Cake, Josema, Juan Medina is another one. But honestly, nobody in this lineup was even top 15 at last year's Mr. Olympia. And albeit Terrence wasn't even at the Olympia last year, so fair that that's not a good comparison point. But for Terrence to have been one of the guys that was rivaling Chris Bumstead, a top 2 guy, he was once talked about as the heir to the throne. And to see, like I said, nobody in this lineup was even top 15 at the Classic Physique Olympia last year. I find it very hard to sit here and act like Terrence is going to have a difficult time winning this show. Looking at how he's looking at this lineup, and no disrespect to the other athletes, but I think Terrence in this one is in kind of a league of his own. He looks incredible. So I personally have Terrence winning Classic Physique. I've got Derek winning Open Bodybuilding. Let me know your predictions for both divisions for the Pittsburgh Pro in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel, and consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.